Story 1 by Ariana Pellegrino. When I just moved into my new house, I had a dream that I got poisoned by my mother and my chest hurt. When I woke up, my chest was still hurting. I found out years later that before we moved in, a mother had poisoned her oldest daughter and killed her. The girl had died in my room. Story 2 by Caitlin Bowers. Me talking to a 4-year-old girl I babysat a few years back. We walked into her grandmother's house where she lived. She stopped in the living room and looked up at the staircase. "Are we going upstairs?" "No, but do you want to play in the living room and watch some SpongeBob? How about that?" "Okay, let's make bracelets," she said. "I'm glad we're not going upstairs." I said, "Why's that?" She looked me dead in the eyes and said something I'll never forget. "There's a man up there, and he's suffocating." Then she giggled and went to get her beads. Story 3 by Smiler1230X. This happened to me and my family when I was 9 years of age. I still remember what happened till this very day, and it still gives me chills to think about. Me, my mom, and my dad were out for the day. My brother was at a training camp since he's going into army in the September. My mom went into the shop after the day out, and I was sitting in the back of the car, and my dad was in the passenger seat. He got his phone out and saw that he had a missed call and a voicemail. The voicemail was left at 1:19 in the afternoon. My dad rang the voicemail, and it was somebody whispering, "Help me." And then the line went dead. My dad made me listen, and this had me worried. I pretended it never bothered me, but it did. When my mom was back, my mom made her listen to the voicemail. She was hesitant to call the police. My dad told her not to make a big deal out of it. When we were home, I was sitting on the computer chair in the living room, and my dad called the number back. Our house phone started ringing. My mom picked it up, but now I was extremely concerned. We tried it one more time. It was definitely our house phone. My dad kept the voicemail, but the strangest part was, my granddad passed away 2 years later, the exact time the voicemail was left. Story 4 by Anonymous. I have never posted something on here, but this is my brother's story. He always saw a ghost named Jacob when he was little. Keep in mind that my whole family has had numerous encounters with ghosts and such, but he used to always say that the boy would annoy him as he slept and play tricks on him by hiding his toys and making him mad. One night, Jacob just stopped appearing, and the figure of a tall, dark, lanky man took his place. He had a very deep voice, and it still chills me to the bone when I think of him. One night, my mom was cooking and my brother yelled for her, saying that he heard Jacob in the living room and that he was saying bad words. My mom took this just as Jacob playing his usual tricks and went back to cooking. My brother screamed at the top of his lungs, "Mom!" He told her that Jacob was in the closet, and he was trying to get him to come in there to explore. The closet was a big walk-in closet, and it was very dark. My brother said that the closet kept opening more and more, and when it was all but open, he could see the outline of the tall man inside, but no Jacob. My parents ended up getting us out of that house as soon as possible. I don't know what the man's intentions were if my brother decided to go play, but things like this never stopped until I was 9. If anyone has experienced something like this, or even worse, please leave a comment. I don't mind if you use this in a video, but please don't use my name. Story 5 by John D. Neat story. This is one of my own. Take it for what it's worth. When I was a young man over 40 years ago, I was really into going into the mountains to hunt fossils. I've heard rumors about the cache of trilobite fossils in the foothills of the James River. I've never been there. Before going any further, I should get lost in a broom closet, so I have a habit of breaking off branches of trees and stabbing them into the ground within sight of the last, so I can find my way back to my car. I know. Go buy a compass, right? My way has always worked and would let me go back to the next weekend to the same spot where I had hopefully found a cache of fossils. The hills were back then littered with my vertical branch markers. On this particular trip, armed with my trusty rock-breaking hammer, I had walked more than 3 times my normal distance without finding a damn thing. Then, in the water under a foot deep, I saw the familiar outline of a trilobite head. Freaking yes! About damn time! Happying my findings, I started cracking every rock in sight, and lo and behold, more goodies. In my glee, I totally forgot the time until I noticed it was getting dark. Ah, shit. No supplies other than a half-gallon of water I carried because it was freaking hot and humid in Virginia during summer. I thought in a mental picture I can remember where all my stakes are, and even in the dark I can get back. Wrong. I found 2 of them, then gave up on finding the next. Tired as hell and carrying a sack of fossils, which are tied to my hip with my water on the other side, I decided just to find a clear spot and sleep till daybreak, and maybe go back and find more goodies and hope no bears would eat me. When I woke, my fossils and water were gone. Being a really light sleeper, this freaked me out. I jumped up, looking around for my stuff. Then after a few minutes, I walked back to the river and started going back down, and it struck me that all my stakes are gone. In my head thinking, I'll see one soon and find my path back to the car, I never found a single one. I was really creeped out by this point. In my head I was thinking, well, at least I have a freshwater river when I get thirsty. No food but clean water. And if I keep going, I'll find someone. Anyone. I walked for about 6 hours, then found my bearings and knew where my car was. Then I got to the driver's door of my car. Hammered in the door was a plank with fresh paint. Do not come back. Story 6 by Chelsea Edwards. When I was born, my mom and sisters and me moved into our new house, and I lived in a little semicircle of houses, so all us neighbors within the semicircle know each other quite well. My next door neighbors and their brother used to live in our house before we did, and he killed himself when he was about 14 or 15 due to depression, and this was like in the 70s. Our houses all used to be connected through the attic, and he used to love messing up around up there and going through both our houses and next door by the attic. So when I was about 5 or 6, I used to have problems sleeping. My mom said she'd always hear my bedroom door open and then hear footsteps running from the doorway into the bathroom. She asked me why I'd been doing that so much recently, and I said because the boy used to hang upside down from the attic, which is right outside my doorway, and would always used to be open and say boo, which used to scare me and was the reason I'd run so fast. I remember this one occasion over the many times that happened. I'd woken up in the middle of the night, don't really know what time. I was bursting for a wee, and when I opened my door, there was a boy hanging upside down, sort of like the way you do when you hang from monkey bars. Only his hair and clothes were normal, like the way you would be standing up normally. He then said, boo. And of course, me being in my 5-year-old state, this used to literally scare the shit out of me. So I ran like the devil himself was after me, right to the bathroom, and the boy would be gone. I described him to my mom. He had pale skin, brown eyes, dark brown hair that was styled in sort of like the Beatles, and he was wearing a purple jumper. He looked pretty normal. His skin was the only thing that was out of the ordinary. This freaked the shit out of her because everything I described was exactly what the boy looked like and was wearing up until he died. We talked about this stuff sometimes, me and my family, and I'm currently 16 now. But a couple years ago, we were talking about it again, and my mom told me that our next-door neighbor's brother hung himself in our attic. Up to this very day, creepy stuff still happens to me. Sometimes at night, I feel like I'm not alone. I used to feel someone smack me on my back hard, and it felt like a million volts went through me. I hear walking around, doors shut by themselves. I see black objects trying to get my attentions out of the corner of my eye. Story 7 by Matthew V. I used to live in an old train station turned farmhouse, an hour west of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. My sisters and I used to hear strange noises, people talking and someone walking around upstairs with cowboy boots on. A man and a woman would talk in the basement, then their voices would start raising to the point where you could hear the man screaming obscenities at her, followed by a gunshot, and the man's voice would be crying, "What have I done?" followed by a second gunshot, and it would repeat again and again and again. Later, I challenged the ghost by saying, "You're not real. If you were, you'd do something. Fucking punk bitches." My computer's chair rolled towards me and started to spin. Then my bed slid to the middle of the room and I covered myself under my blanket and prayed for it to end. The next night, I saw a woman hanging in what was our living room. This went on for 3 years until we moved. I went back years later. It was empty, so I was looking through the sliding doors beside the dining room window and had a feeling like I was being watched. I slowly turned towards the window and saw a man standing behind a little girl looking at me. He was missing half his face, wearing an old Western clothing, and she was in an old dress smiling and waving at me as if she knew me. I bolted, clearing a fence, and didn't stop till I got to my car and raced off. I know the current owner and he hears the same thing all the time, but refuses to move. Story 8 by Megan Robbie. Oh, I have one. This is completely 100% true. I wasn't dreaming it and it wasn't a hallucination. One day I was at my friend's house. I was probably 12 and she was 13. Her house is in the middle of the woods. Creepy, I know. Well, one night I was awake still because I have trouble sleeping. Everyone in the house was asleep and I knew that for sure. My friend was beside me asleep. It was around 2 a.m. I'm laying in her room and the only light is coming from the living room because she didn't have a door. I'm laying, looking at the ceiling and decided to sit up. I sit up, trying not to wake her, and out of the corner of my eye I see something move. I didn't look because, number one, I was too afraid to, and number two, I assumed it was something from the TV. So I'm there playing with our cat. I throw its yarn out to the door, and as it chases it, I look into the living room and see the rocking chair moving on its own. I'm not talking about something touched it and it moved a bit. I'm talking about it's rocking like someone was sitting in it. I refused to get up at this point because I was scared. I rub my eyes trying to think of some explanation. While I do that, I look back into the living room and this scared me the most. Every time I talk about it, I want to cry. I see someone or something in the rocking chair as it stops. I see whatever it was sitting there take its gaze from the TV and slowly look at me. The only thing I remember was its hands gripping the rocking chair and the glowing white eyes staring back at me. I sat there for at least 5 seconds before I took the blanket and threw it over my head. That was the last time I went to her house. She, to this day, lives in that house. We aren't really friends anymore, but I still worry about it. If I was the only one who saw it or if someone else did too. Story 9 by Unforgettable AJ. My story. It was a normal night. It was about 3:30 a.m. I was sleeping in my bed when I was woken up by the smell of cigarette smoke. I knew my parents smoked, so I turned on my bedside table lamp. When I looked into the corner of my room, I saw a man standing there. He was wearing a suit, holding what seemed to look like a cigarette. He walked over slowly to me and put his hand on my head. He whispered, "Go back to bed, my love. I'm waiting." I slipped back to sleep and I thought it was just my imagination. The next night I was woken up by the same smell and I called for my parents. I got no answer. Since my room doesn't have a door, I looked out to the hall. There was the man. He swiftly walked over to my door and screamed, "I told you to go back to bed!" Rather furiously, he hovered over me as he screamed, but as soon as he said bed, he disappeared. Ever since then, I never saw the man again. Story 10 by Applebum. Around 5 years ago, my little brother was hit by a car. A young man around 21 was trying to get to work. Though that isn't important, it was a hard time for everyone, and the soft sounds of his toys going off after his death made it harder. Well, as the year gone by, the sounds kinda stopped and became a distant but sad memory. My mother never got over it, but I started to learn to live with it. Till his birthday this year, I had a dream that I was holding his hand while standing next to the road. He was faceless, but I knew who he was and felt no fear. His voice was confusing and with no real point of sound. Then shriek! The sound of a car slamming his brakes and the warm hand dispersed. Then nothing. I woke up to see my brother's little monkey doll in my arms, though. I know I didn't have it before.